They make us want to retch.
And Dad's not losing a dad.
You gotta go, Dan. You're the best man.
He's gaining a baby brother.
I'm pregnant.
And all the Wheel's Gonna Get You tonight at 6:30.
This is Eyewitness News with Floyd Kelmer. And the Avalos for Steve Deschler with weather. Jim Weigel with sports. And the Eyewitness News team.
Good evening, Chicago. The deadline is just 5 hours away. Last-minute diplomatic efforts have failed to resolve the crisis in the Persian Gulf. It is now all but certain America and its allies will go to war with Iraq. Chuck Gowdy is in Dubai, where he spoke today with Marines from the Chicago area. Chuck?
Well, Floyd, virtually everybody here in the Mideast now is feeling that we are but one word away from war, and that word is attack. The only uncertainty is who is going to say it and precisely when. The troops, the ships for the Allies are now in place. About 600,000 troops for the Allies in the United States amassed along the Kuwaiti border, facing off against about 550,000 troops for Iraq. The ships are in the Gulf, including the USS Guam, an amphibious assault ship. We visited on that ship this afternoon. The sailors and Marines on board the Guam are due to sail for the Kuwaiti coast very soon. They may have left already. But today, when we spent some time on board, it was astounding to find out that nobody knew the correct time of the UN deadline, including the ship's commander, who mistakenly thought the deadline had passed.
Today, or day off.
Does that indicate that people are too concerned about the deadline itself in terms of movement?
Well, I don't know. I really can't say.
Days come and go around here. Buy dates have come and gone, and we're still here waiting for the word to go in.
They say go, it's just, that's when probably the change will come to everyone.
So what does January 15th mean to you?
Just halfway through the next month, another payday.
The sailors we spoke with agreed that they don't much care about political deadlines, which January the 15th is in their opinion. What they care about is their orders. And when they get their orders, that will be the date they remember. One GI we spoke with today said he thought, quote, Saddam Hussein was bluffing. Well, apparently now, with the deadline just 5 hours away, we find out that he wasn't. And according to the GI, Saddam Hussein will find out that neither was the United States. Live in Dubai, Chuck Gowdy, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Floyd?
Chuck, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Where are you exactly now?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea for me to say precisely where I am right now. We are reporting from Dubai, which is in the United Arab Emirates, located about a couple hundred miles south of Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. This is one of the allies in the fight, or the presumed fight, against Iraq. There are military-related areas around here that we've had access to over the last couple of days.
Well, assuming that you're in a military environment there, can you talk about the mood of the people around you? What's going on around you? What's happening?
Well, I can. I'm not in a military environment right now. We're essentially in a broadcasting facility here. But the mood is one of horrible helplessness. I mean, we're sitting in a region that is poised to go to war, and nobody seemingly can do anything about it. The only way I can describe it to you is kind of like that dream that you have when you're falling and falling and falling. You wake up before you hit the ground. Well, this is no dream over here, and this thing continues to fall toward war, and it seems as though at any time now it's going to bottom out.
Okay, Chuck, I just wanted to get the mental picture. Thank you very much. Be careful, okay? Reporter Jim Gibbons was with the family of one of the Marines that we just saw talking with Chuck Gowdy in Dubai. Corporal Russell Glenn's mother, brother, and sisters all gathered in their Country Club Hills home, waiting for him to appear on their television screens. Corporal Glenn appeared for only a few moments. His family says they were overjoyed, of course, to see him, and later on Glenn's mother reacted.
I am totally afraid. I am terrified. It didn't become real to me until yesterday. And beside my faith in God, that whatever happens, it will be God's will, I'm terrified. I don't know what else to say. That's my youngest son, my baby.
Russell Glenn enlisted 2 years ago. According to his family, he plans to make the military his career. In Israel, military forces prepared today for possible attack from Iraq even before the midnight deadline. I said possible. The Palestinians fought Israeli soldiers on the Gaza Strip and also on the West Bank today. This followed the assassination of 2 PLO leaders last night in Tunisia. Marianne Childers was in Israel. She left there this afternoon. She joins us now by telephone from Frankfurt, Germany. Marianne, what can you tell us about before you left Israel?
Floyd, I think you characterized the situation right earlier. The situation in Israel is that there's concern about attacks from within the border as well as from outside tonight. The concerns about that Iraqi preemptive strike actually surfaced a couple of days ago, Floyd. But I must tell you, they really are just speculation. The military wants to make it clear that Israel is very ready. Today, they rolled out the big guns. I mean, they did it literally. The Army displayed a battery of U.S.-made Hawk anti-aircraft missiles and said Israeli jets could reach missile bases in Iraq in 30 minutes and the western capital of Baghdad in an hour. Now, this was a show of force that was designed to calm fear and reassure people who, for a week now, have been bombarded by warnings to protect themselves and their families by literally sealing off their windows and their doors in their homes with plastic. The Israeli government has distributed more than 3.5 million gas masks, and Floyd, even the hotels are providing them to their guests. I can tell you there's nothing more jarring than to get up in the morning and to see your morning paper and to see a notice that you can pick up your gas mask downstairs. Yesterday, the Civil Defense began a very limited distribution of gas masks to the provinces. That's among Palestinians who live along the borders of the occupied territories.
Well, we've lost our connection with Marianne Childers reporting from Frankfurt on the conditions today in Israel before she left to go to West Germany. Hundreds of protesters hoping to block the war in the Persian Gulf succeeded only in blocking downtown rush hour traffic in Chicago this evening. Keith Bromery is out there amongst them, and he has a report. Keith?
Well, Floyd, as you can see behind me, the protesters are now back here at the Federal Building Plaza where they started about 4 or 5 hours ago. At that time, they held a rally here, and then shortly thereafter, they started to move south on Dearborn Street down toward the Congress. At that point on Congress, they laid down, some of them, and started to block traffic, at which point police arrested them, a few of them anyway, about half a dozen were arrested there. Also, the police used their horse patrol to try to get the crowd back up on the sidewalk. Now, at that point, the crowd seemed to split. Half of them going north, the other half staying south. Again, there were a number of arrests down there as they tried to block traffic at Congress and Dearborn. Then they moved down to a military building, a military recruiting building, where they blocked traffic there as well. There were some arrests made there as well. From there, again, this second group started to move north. They ended up going to the Standard Oil building, where they held a rally there, and then walked northbound on Michigan Avenue. At that point, the police had to cordon off part of Michigan Avenue during the height of the rush hour traffic. They went all the way through the Gold Coast and then started walking up Lakeshore Drive. At that point, again, around 5 o'clock, when the traffic is at its worst on Lakeshore Drive, they were able to block traffic there for quite a while, and the police let them go all the way up to North Avenue. At that point, the police routed them off on North Avenue. They came around under the viaduct and then back down south on the inner drive, where they finally went down on the loop, and they're back down here at the Federal Building again. Again, this is something that's likely to escalate. We're likely to see more of this kind of thing as the situation in the Middle East remains unstable. And
Mr. Cuellar made a final appeal today to Saddam Hussein to withdraw his troops. But the only response from Baghdad has been, quote, a furnace of hell awaits the U.S. and its military allies. Egyptian President Mubarak called on Saddam to think about the time when he faces his God and urged him to withdraw his troops. Jordan's King Hussein issued a similar plea, but said his nation stands ready to defend itself from both Iraq and Israel. Meantime, U.S. military forces in the Persian Gulf ran battle drills and air combat exercises today in preparation for possible war.
The Pentagon says troops will be ready for whatever order President Bush issues. Chuck Gowdy is in the Gulf keeping track of late military developments. He joins us now live from Dubai. Chuck?
Joel and Linda, U.S. soldiers and battleships right now continue to position themselves closer to the Kuwaiti border and the Kuwaiti coast. The air fleet for the United States and the Allies is now on a high state of alert, including, we are told, B-52 bombers that have been reportedly brought into this region to secret air bases for possible use in a first airstrike. The past 12 hours, we have personally witnessed a number of GIs packing their bags and checking out of hotels in this region. They had been put up there for a time, and as they leave, they talk about something coming down very soon. People around here are jumpy. Within the last few hours at this location, there were 2 very loud explosions off in the distance, rattling windows where we are and shaking the ground underneath us. As it turns out, despite police pulling their automatic weapons because they feared that this could be the start of something, instead, we believe that it was nothing more than sonic booms, possibly from fighter jets running night drills. It is already morning here on the Arabian Peninsula, Wednesday, January the 16th. The morning papers have just come out. All of them have some fashion of a headline like this: Deadline Day. This morning, there is little clue as to what next, while U.S. troops wait for some kind of word.
The military receives what's called a warning order, and when we receive a warning order, then we know that hostilities are imminent.
Sigler says the USS Guam has not yet received such a warning, but naval sources here on the Arabian Peninsula say that sometime tomorrow morning, the Guam and several other attack vessels will begin moving up the Persian Gulf toward the shores of Kuwait. Sailors and Marines on board the Guam this day are busy covering forest camouflage with desert colors and fine-tuning helicopters which would be used to fly in assault teams, possibly in the first wave. But even though they anticipate attack orders, USS Guam officers have lost track of the UN deadline. When I questioned the ship's commander, he thought the deadline had already passed.
We thought it was 9 o'clock today. We're a day off.
Does that indicate that people are too concerned about the deadline itself in terms of movement?
Well, I don't know. I really can't say. But I guess we're off one day. We thought it was today.
Our understanding from the radio.
So what does January 15th mean to you?
Just halfway through the next month, another payday. That's about it. January 15th. Not going to mean anything until we get some information that we're actually going to do something.
No one knows exactly what's going to happen.
Nevertheless, medical tech Sean Shanahan of Lake Forest says he is concerned about the deadline because he'd probably have to treat the first wounded.
With something of this magnitude, there's going to be your normal war casualties, any kind of combat injuries, but we've been doing a lot of training also for chemical and biological injuries.
Are we more concerned about the deadline than you are?
Well, I think you are in a political sense back in the States. We listen to BBC and we get news tapes, but there's a certain amount of time late involved with hearing the news. So we're dedicated more to our job and being ready than we are daily concerns as the meetings go on.
The Guam just off of a deadline and a very stiff assignment, one of 2 U.S. Navy vessels that helped out in the rescue of Somalian refugees, Somalian diplomats back the early part of January. The people on board that ship say rescuing 280 people out of Somalia during civil unrest was baptism for the Persian Gulf. But with the firepower amassed here on the Arabian Peninsula, it is hard to imagine that anything could prepare anybody for what could come. Live in Dubai, Chuck Gowdy, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Joel, Linda?
Chuck, thank you very much. You and cameraman Steve Irwin, take care of yourselves, okay? Now, the decision to send American forces into action will, of course, be made at the White House. Channel 7's Paul Mikey joins us live right now from Washington, D.C. Paul, any late developments there?
Not at all, Linda. There's a great sense of foreboding here. One senator that we spoke to earlier said he has never seen such a somber mood among his colleagues. The tension in the air so thick, he says, you could cut it with a knife. All the diplomatic initiatives have failed, and tonight there isn't even the hint of a breakthrough.
Why the sacrifices? Why you want to shed your blood and the bloods of Iraqis?
Tonight, the Iraqi ambassador left Washington, warning that an attack by the U.S. will constitute mass murder. On Capitol Hill, Senate Minority Leader Robert Dole appealed for his colleagues and the country to unite behind the president.
So the time is late, but there's still time left. And it's still my hope, and I'm still optimistic enough to believe that there can be a resolution without a shot being fired.
The protests continued outside the White House tonight. Nearly 60 people arrested here so far on this day.
Security outside the White House and most other government buildings is extraordinarily high. The president tonight continued meeting with top advisors, but, quote, had nothing special planned. The president would take no questions during a photo opportunity this morning, shortly after taking a solitary walk in the Rose Garden. White House Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater saying the president is at peace with himself. He's ready to make the tough decisions ahead that are necessary. And further, that those tough decisions are likely to come sooner rather than later.
I tell you, if talking is impossible, then the war is inevitable. And if it is inevitable, it will not be a quick strike surgical war. It will have tremendous impact militarily and economically upon the whole world.
While the debate goes on, the Pentagon awaits orders.
As the clock ticks down to midnight, we feel the obligation to remind everyone that this is a truly very dangerous situation.
Among others, Iowa Senator Tom Harkin tonight urged the president to pick up the phone and give Saddam a call, talk to him man-to-man, meet him in Geneva if necessary. The White House has rejected that proposal so far, saying the time for that sort of dialogue has passed. And if it comes to a shooting war, most of the senators and congressmen we've spoken to here the past few days say that it quite possibly could come before week's end. Live on Capitol Hill, Paul Meinke, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Lyndon Joel.
All right, Paul, thank you. Tens of thousands of Iraqis paraded the streets of Baghdad today. They called it Iraq's Day of Challenge. The demonstration was organized by the government in support of Saddam Hussein. Schools closed so children could take part, many shouting slogans such as "Down, down, Bush." Others on the street, even soldiers, said they were hoping for peace. And it's been clear for weeks now that Israel could be the first target of an Iraqi attack if war breaks out. Concerns of a preemptive strike prompted a big show of military muscle there today. Marianne Childers has spent the past 2 days in Israel. She's just flown to Frankfurt, where she filed this report.
The Israeli army showed off U.S.-made Hawk missiles, which can reach western Iraq in 30 minutes and Baghdad in 1 hour. It was to show that Israel is ready and to reassure residents who've been preparing for days for a possible chemical attack. The mayor of Tel Aviv inspected preparations.
We are not in a panic. We handle it seriously. We consider it seriously, and we made all the preparation for if worse comes to worse.
The Israeli Civil Defense Corps has distributed more than 3.5 million gas masks across the country. Children are encouraged to try on toy masks so they'll know what to do with the real thing. A more limited distribution is now underway among Palestinians along the border of the occupied territories. Part of this region is also under curfew, a precaution authorities hope will prevent violence following the assassinations of 3 PLO leaders in Tunis.
It's going to be conducted according to international law. But they should remember, and all of us should remember, that war is a war.
In Jerusalem, the government is asking people not to hoard drugs or medical supplies and says there's enough food stockpile to feed the entire nation should supplies be interrupted or cut off. And everywhere in Israel on this day of the deadline, people are watching the clock. Reporting from Frankfurt, West Germany, Marianne Childers, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Israel today mobilized Army reservists who are specialists in medical and emergency services. Linda?
Back here in Chicago, protests continue against American involvement in the Middle East. One demonstration disrupted traffic on Lakeshore Drive during the height of tonight's rush hour. And as Channel 7's Keith Bromley reports, there were arrests during those protests.
Some of the arrests occurred at Dearborn Street and the Congress, where protesters attempted to block rush hour traffic. Mounted police were eventually able to reclaim the intersection by forcing demonstrators back onto the sidewalk. However, it was a different story further north, where a group of nearly 1,000 protesters successfully tied up rush hour traffic on Michigan Avenue and Lakeshore Drive. Northbound traffic on the drive was completely blocked for nearly half an hour as the group stopped in place between Division Street and North Avenue.
It means students right now on strike around the country saying no school as usual, disrupting major institutions and saying, no, we ain't going to go. Hell no, we ain't going to go.
The protest began with a rally at the Federal Building Plaza, where organizers called on individual demonstrators to express their feelings through civil disobedience if they were so inclined.
I'm here because I think the war is wrong. We need to bring the troops home. I don't think we need to have a lot of people killed.
We finna lose blood for some damn oil, excuse my language.
Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
Later, Father Michael Flager, pastor of St. Sabina's Church, was joined by about 200 followers for a rally at the Federal Plaza. commemorating Martin Luther King's birthday and protesting U.S. involvement in the Persian Gulf. Protest organizers say this is just the beginning of what will soon become a massive peace movement in this country. And if war does break out in the Middle East, these demonstrators say there will also be a war right here on the streets of Chicago. From the Federal Plaza, Keith Bromery, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
We have a program note for you. There will be an expanded edition of Nightline immediately following this newscast. Ted Koppel will be reporting live from the Middle East.
Still ahead tonight for us, new fear in the Baltic republics about what the Soviet Union will do next. And Jim Edgar says he's cutting dozens of people from his own staff.
No, 300.
It's been almost uninterrupted, men and materiel. Until now, there are some 415,000 U.S. troops in the region and an incredible armada of ships and, of course, over 1,000 warplanes. With a report now on the latest buildup and where things now stand, my colleague in Saudi Arabia, Forrest Sawyer.
Pictures of a war machine shifting into high gear.
Well, you can really see a change this past week.
On the ground and in the air, troops are moving north toward Kuwait to the battlefield, while new forces still arrive from the States.
I volunteered to come here. I felt that this is where I want to be. If the country needs us to take care of what we need to do.
The most destructive array of military power ever assembled is poising to strike.
No question in my mind at all that we're going to really kick some butt. We're going to do real well.
The point of the spear, the F-15 Eagle, the match of any fighter in the air. These planes will be among the first to challenge the Iraqis. They've trained to return to base only for fast pit stops.
We can probably reload an airplane, fuel him, and get him back in the air quicker than you can change the oil in your car.
If the U.S. begins the war, it will be launched from this airbase, from others like it throughout the region, and from the decks of U.S. carriers. One more sign the deadline has arrived. The already stringent security at all these installations has been tightened even further.
Nobody really talks about it that much, but they're just really stressed out about it and scared. People are scared because you don't really know what's going to happen. You can't tell.
Clear the P! Be clear!
On the last day before the deadline, the 82nd Airborne armed their Apache helicopters and scrawled notes on the Hellfire missiles they hope will save American lives.
It's just our little message to Iraq, letting them know that we're ready to do whatever we're called upon to do.
Those untrained in war are preparing too, learning how to survive chemical attacks and stocking supplies for an uncertain future. Only a few have simply packed up and headed for the hills. This morning, as the clock raced toward the brink, eastern Saudi Arabia was quiet. The air was cold and clear. There was no sign of a gathering storm. Forrest Sawyer, ABC News, eastern Saudi Arabia.
And once again, we are reporting to you live from Amman, Jordan, where it is just before 7 o'clock in the morning, coming up to the midnight deadline Eastern Time in the United States. Standing by now at the Pentagon is ABC's Pentagon correspondent, Bob Zelnick. And joining us from Norman, Oklahoma, is the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, now an advisor and consultant to ABC News, Admiral William Crowe. Bob, just first of all, give me a sense of mood at the Pentagon. Is it as quiet and as dark there as over at the White House?
Well, Ted, in fact, the lights are burning brightly at the Pentagon tonight, but most of them belong to networks who've showed up in the press room here to report on a war which apparently is not going to begin, at least during the next several hours. The parking lots are relatively empty. The press offices were closed hours ago. We were able to reach a number of Pentagon and other senior administration officials at their homes tonight. I don't think they would be at their homes were this war imminent in terms of starting in the next several hours.
When you and I were talking on the phone about an hour or so ago, you were telling me, however, of a conversation that you had with some Navy officer many months ago, long before it seemed as though we would come to this point, I wonder if you'd tell me about that conversation.
Yeah, back in late August or early September, I asked a senior Navy official, uniformed official, what would be the clearest sign that we were about to launch an attack against Iraq. And he said that probably the biggest sign would be when 2 aircraft carriers moved into the Persian Gulf. He said one of them we might send in there as a test, but as you know, the waters are narrow, they're not comfortable in there, the waters are shallow, they're vulnerable to missiles. But if we send 2 of them in there, they can operate around the clock, 12 hours at a time, then that crew will stand down, and the other aircraft carrier will take over and conduct operations. Well, today, there had been 1 aircraft carrier, the Midway in the Persian Gulf, and today a second one, the Ranger, passed through the Straits of Hormuz into the Gulf. A second sign, of course, today, Ted, the movement of a squadron of B-52 bombers from Diego Garcia to the Mideast, and that certainly cuts down the travel time and increases the number of sorties they can fly.
Admiral Crow, to a certain extent, I guess we're at that stage for our poker players in the audience where the pot has been growing now. Both sides are acting as though they have a pat hand. But given those 2 carriers, given the B-52s, given the sense of imminent war in the Persian Gulf, how long can that kind of thing be sustained?
I don't really know the answer, Ted, but I would think that we are right on the brink of war. And I appreciated Bob's remarks. When you start frustrating the Pentagon press, and also when you send 2 carriers in, those are truly ominous signs.
Well, you know, because we are coming quite literally up to that point where the midnight deadline is passing, it's inevitable that people are going to be looking at that. And then as the hours and the days pass, there may be a certain feeling of letdown. When you say that we are on the brink of war, are you speaking in terms of days or are you speaking in terms of hours?
I would think in somewhere between those 2.
Give us a sense of
probably in just 1 or 2, 3 days.
Give us a sense of what has to happen. In other words, how do you crank up a force of 415,000? I'm only speaking now of the Americans. You've got more than 200,000 other allies in the coalition. How many hours does it take to take them from the moment that the president gives the order to the moment that combat is initiated?
I think the crank-up period you're referring to, most of it has already been done. We're in the latter stages of that, and when the final order comes, they will already be on the step. The period of delay would be very short.
Would it be accurate at this point, Bob Zelnick, to suggest that we are not going to see action on the ground even when the war begins?
Oh, I think that's quite accurate. In fact, I think the commanders in the field in Saudi Arabia have lost their argument with the White House to wait until the Stage 2 buildup is essentially completed and the force is not only deployed, but have had a chance to acclimate and work up some exercises. I think that the movement that we're seeing toward war now indicates that the U.S. intends to rely on air power and air power alone for a period of days or weeks, and that there's a belief among many that air power alone will be decisive, not that it will entirely obviate the need for a ground campaign, but that the ground campaign will involve minimal casualties and minimal risks for the United States. And I must add, in all candor, that that is not a view that's universally shared even by strategists within this building. There are some who believe that we're putting too much reliance on air power, that we've done it in the past and it hasn't worked, and that the belief is very strong that air power will be so decisive that it will not only do the things militarily that air power does, but that it will break the will of the Iraqis, that it will make them speechless, that it will terrify them, that they will have little to do but run around looking for Americans to surrender to. And if this view prevails, the war will be short and successful. If it does not prevail, it'll be much longer and much more tricky getting out.
Bob, you've led us in the direction of another one of our specialists joining us tonight, General Bernard Traynor. He is a retired Marine Corps general. I believe he's joining us from Boston. I think to a certain degree what Bob has been saying reflects some of your own views, General Traynor, namely that you can't do it with air power alone. Your belief, sir?
Well, I'd like to hope that we could do it with air power.